Hey, scholars. One final video for the class, which is final exam preparation. The final exam, of course, is coming up on Monday to make sure that we're all prepared for it. So, the syllabus is pretty clear, but just walking through quickly the chapters. You got inventory management, you've got aggregate planning and S&OP, you got materials planning and ERP, you've got short-term scheduling, lean operations, maintenance, and reliability are the chapters. A lot of material. Somebody asked in class whether it was going to be comprehensive. Well, I don't expect you to forget everything we learned at the first part of the term, which was all of 8 weeks ago. So, yeah, you're going to need to know maybe some of the other, be able to come back with some of the other OM decisions that we studied in the first half of the class. I won't ask any math questions from the first half of the class, but you're going to need to know the OM decisions because you may get a question, where you're now a hypothetical general manager of a plant in Schenectady, and look at the OM decisions and tell me what the decisions you would make based on whatever the scenario might be. And you can focus on the OM decisions that we just went through, the latter ones, but I also want you to perhaps focus on some of the earlier ones if they're more germane to whatever that scenario might be. So. Just quickly on the chapters, inventory management. I mean, you got to know the EOQ model. In any of these chapters, you have to know the definition of what we're talking about. Inventory, there's three types of inventory. You got raw materials inventory, you got work in process inventory, and finished goods inventory. Just know that stuff. Everything that we highlighted in class on inventory management is critical. You're going to get a math question on EOQ, so just be ready for that. Aggregate planning and S&OP, again, definitions, what are they? Type of question that you might get there is, what is the relationship between the forecasting processes that we've discussed in class? Well, what I'd expect you to do there is I'd expect you to take me from an S&OP to an aggregate plan down to an MRP, materials requirements planning, into short-term scheduling, and walk through the highlights of each of those. So be ready for a question like that. That's a critical part of what we've been studying for the last 4 weeks. So it's just going to be there. MRP and ERP, the next chapter, which was chapter 14. What do we do with a materials requirements plan? What is it all about? Well, you know what it's about. It's about making sure that we've got the inventory required to meet the demand that came out in the aggregate plan. Now, what's a critical thing that happens in the MRP is, of course, that the aggregate plan is disaggregated. And you need to know that, right? It's just part of the process. ERP, we didn't spend a lot of time on that, but that's an enterprise resource plan. It's at a higher level than the MRP. It's almost always computerized now, but it's an important part of the process, maybe at a higher level than the plant manager level, but it's important to make sure that the organization is coordinated and doing things as efficiently as possible. Short-term scheduling, just posted a video on that. Short-term scheduling, the critical thing there is, what I spend most of the time on in class is bottleneck math. So understanding how we actually schedule our production runs. What are the three things that we schedule? We're primarily going to schedule our people, our machinery, and our materials. So you need to know that stuff. Lean operations, and what's that all about? It's a capstone chapter. It's where the rubber meets the road. It's where we get to a point where we're actually applying everything that we've learned in operations management. So study that text. You got two different components of it. You got just in time, and you got the TPS, Toyota Production System. Well, understand those. Understand, if I'm going to ask you something about TPS, I expect you to say something about Deming because it's very closely tied to the teachings of Deming, and Toyota is a huge proponent of Deming's teaching. So, you can't talk to me about the TPS without mentioning Deming. If you do, you're not going to get full credit. That might be take 20% off of the grade on that particular question if you don't mention it. So you need to understand how the three components tied together. In just in time, you need to understand, why in the world do we worry about these minimal levels of inventory? Well, you do it because inventory is wasteful. It just is. So, read the text, study the notes and the things that we talked about in class, but be able to seriously answer some very detailed questions on that lean chapter. It's one of the more critical chapters in the textbook, and it ties to the 8th OM decision, which is inventory control, but it is across the whole organization, or the whole of operations management. Chapter 17 is maintenance and reliability. What's maintenance and reliability all about? It's about maintaining your equipment. What's reliability? Reliability is what's the probability that this machine is going to break down on us, over whatever time frame that might be. There's some math in the textbook which goes through that. It's typically multiplicative. So, if you've got 5 components, each of them at 98% uptime, if it was one component, you'd expect to be down 2% of the time. If you've got 5 components, it's again multiplicative. It's 0.98 times 0.98 times 0.98, 5 times, and whatever that number works out to be. I don't know what it is, 94% or whatever it is. So you'd expect to be down 6% of the time, because if machine 1 is going to be down 2% of the time and machine 2 is going to be down 2% of the time, et cetera, then it's very likely that it increases the probability that you're going to have a problem. It's not going to be just the 2%, because one machine may work, but the other one may break down. Its 2% isn't going to come at the same time that the first machine's 2% is going to come in. A good quick story there is, sometimes even though you may have good reliability, there may be something that shuts them all down. So you've got that math that you just did, but if all of a sudden you run out of power in the plant, everything's down because everything runs on electricity. So another example of that is you're out fishing in a boat that's got 3 engines on it. Well, if you're on a gas, you're not going anywhere. So even though they're very reliable, you've got one thing that could make the whole thing shut down. So that, the math kind of reliability math takes a little common sense too, but at a high level, I think you get the picture. So maintenance and reliability, you need to understand the difference between the 2 different types of maintenance that we talked about, which is the breakdown maintenance, you fix it after it breaks, or it's the preventative maintenance. And what are those all about? And it's pretty well laid out in the text. So study those things. You'll be ready for the final. There's probably going to be a couple of surprise questions. I might ask you something about, how do you do an effective presentation? Well, all of you should know how to do an effective presentation now, right? Start strong, give an outline, tell a story, make a point, finish strong. If I ask that question and somebody doesn't get it, I'll be very disappointed. So anyways, let's study hard for the exam. Again, it'll be about an hour and 15 minutes of work, and you need to know the stuff pretty well to be able to get it out of your head onto a piece of paper succinctly in the time allotted. So I'll see you all on Monday.